Long ago, on the dusty roads of Route 66, there lived a man named Henry. He was a farmer, but not the kind you imagine with big tractors and fertile land. No. Henry's farm was small, barely enough to grow corn and beans for himself. His house was a wooden shack with holes in the roof, and every time it rained, drops would fall directly onto his bed. People in town used to say Henry was the unluckiest man in all of Oklahoma. Henry had one old truck that coughed black smoke every time it started. And yet, every morning, he would drive down Route 66, hoping, just hoping, that life would one day surprise him. His neighbors laughed. "Henry, stop dreaming. You'll never be more than a poor farmer with empty pockets." But Henry didn't argue. He just smiled, as if he knew something they didn't. One hot summer afternoon, Henry drove farther than usual. His truck rattled and squeaked until it suddenly broke down in the middle of nowhere. There was no gas station, no mechanic, just the endless road shimmering in the heat. He kicked the tire, sat on the ground, and whispered, "God, why me?" As he looked around, Henry noticed something strange. By the side of the road, buried halfway in the dirt, was a rusty old box. Curious, he dug it out with his bare hands. The lock was broken, and inside he found nothing but old, yellowed papers. Disappointed, he threw the box aside, but before leaving, his eyes caught a faded map hidden under the papers. The map had hand-drawn markings leading to a spot deep in the Arizona desert. At first, Henry thought it was a joke, maybe the work of kids. But the more he studied it, the more convinced he became. Something about that map called to him. "What if?" he whispered, holding it tight. He returned home with the map, but for days he couldn't sleep. The thought haunted him. Could it be treasure? Gold? Oil? His mind raced with possibilities. And so, with nothing left to lose, Henry packed a small bag, filled his truck with the last gallons of gas he had, and set off toward Arizona. The journey was long, filled with endless roads, scorching heat, and nights sleeping inside the truck. More than once, he thought about turning back. But then he remembered the laughter of his neighbors, the way they looked at him like a fool. No, he had to prove them wrong. After days of travel, Henry finally reached the marked spot. It was an abandoned stretch of desert, silent and lifeless. His heart sank. "Maybe I'm chasing ghosts," he muttered. But then he saw something glimmering beneath the sand. He knelt, brushed away the dirt, and uncovered a piece of rock that sparkled in the sunlight. His hands trembled. It wasn't just a rock, it was a vein of pure gold. Henry gasped, tears filled his eyes. He fell to his knees, laughing and crying at the same time. All his life he had been called a fool, a dreamer, a man destined for nothing. And here, in the middle of the desert, fate had handed him a chance. He dug frantically, uncovering more and more pieces of gold. His pockets couldn't hold them all, so he filled a sack, his truck, everything he could. Exhausted but smiling, he whispered to himself, This is just the beginning." Henry drove back along Route 66 with his truck loaded down with gold. The road seemed different now. Every mile felt like a victory. He imagined how the people in town would look at him once they saw his fortune. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the poor fool anymore. When he arrived, the neighbors couldn't believe their eyes. Henry walked into the diner wearing dusty boots, the same old hat, but in his hands he carried a sack heavy with golden stones. The entire place went silent. Then whispers filled the air. Is that Henry, the same Henry who couldn't even fix his roof? In days, Henry's story spread across Oklahoma. Reporters came, strangers shook his hand, and the same people who once laughed at him now called him Sir. He bought a big piece of land, built a new farmhouse, and even helped rebuild the church that had been falling apart for years. People said Henry's luck finally turned. But with fortune came temptation. Banks wanted his investments, merchants wanted his gold, and so-called friends wanted favors. Henry, once ignored, was now surrounded by people smiling too wide, talking too sweet. At first, he enjoyed the attention, but deep down, he knew something was off. One night, while sitting on his porch, Henry stared at the sky and whispered, "Why do I feel emptier now than before?" He remembered the moment in the desert when he found the gold. The real joy wasn't in the gold itself, it was in the hope, the faith that life could change. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that. Weeks later, a young boy from town knocked on his door. His family was poor, just like Henry once was. The boy asked if Henry could help them buy medicine for his sick mother. Without thinking twice, Henry gave him more money than the boy had ever seen. The boy's eyes lit up with tears, and he hugged Henry tight. At that moment, Henry felt something he hadn't felt since the day he found the map: true joy. He realized the gold was never meant to make him rich. It was meant to give him the chance to change lives, starting with his own. From then on, Henry used his fortune to help rebuild farms after storms, pay for children's schooling, and make sure no neighbor went hungry again. The same road where he once drove with despair became the road of hope for many others. And so the man once called the unluckiest farmer in Oklahoma became a legend along Route 66, not because of the gold he found, but because of the heart he discovered within himself. The lesson? Sometimes life waits until the very end to show you that every laugh, every doubt, every moment of suffering was leading you to something greater. Wealth is not in gold or money. It is in what you choose to do with the blessings you are given.